Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South. Venezuela's economic minister Tarek El Aissami announced that the country will carry out a special fuel distribution plan during the quarantine to stop the coronavirus from spreading. He says the oil industry's working class and the Bolivarian armed forces are concentrating efforts to restore the supply of gasoline, which has been affected by U.S. sanctions.
Este perverso plan de bloqueo naval.
This perverse naval blocking plan and the recurrent intimidation that has been taking place against potential suppliers of the country is preventing the supply of chemical additives, supplies necessary for the national distribution of the non-combustible production process. These extremist actions by the supremacists, the United States government, seek to increase the difficulties of the Venezuelan people as it faces the COVID-19 pandemic. Their plan is to affect the heart of the development and economic activities from industrial and production to public services and transportation, electric energy, among others, which have been designated as areas excluded from the compliance to social isolation in order to meet the vital needs of the population.
Designados como áreas exceptuadas.
Los pacientes aquí.
Frente a esta nueva agresión.
Facing this new aggression, we will be activating a special plan for fuel distribution aimed at guaranteeing the mobility of prioritized sectors, which are exceptions from the collective quarantine under the state of the alarm decreed by President Nicolás Maduro in order to counter the coronavirus pandemic.
De la cuarentena colectiva.
Today, Venezuela has rejected the support of the European Union for the unconstitutional interventionist and coup initiatives by the United States. The Foreign Ministry statement went on to condemn the complicit silence of the EU amid the aggressions of the Trump administration against Venezuela's sovereignty. Cuba's campesinos are doing their part to help in the country's efforts to battle COVID-19. Farmers of the Credit and Services Cooperative Frank País of the town of Alquizar in Artemisa province made a food donation to the Pedro Curi Tropical Medicine Institute, which is caring for a large number of coronavirus patients. As of Thursday, Cuba had confirmed 233 cases of COVID-19, 21 of which were announced during the most recent health ministry update.
The patients here are fed well. They say they are satisfied when asked. Nevertheless, we have a lot of difficulty bringing in some products like vegetables, just what you all have bought. Good eating contributes to the strengthening of health and helps to prevent people from getting sick. Food is a sort of therapy. The doctor indicates what each patient should eat, and in that kitchen, which is a good kitchen, they prepare the food and they take it to the patient. So I think, in that sense, this is a good service, of the meal service, which these persons needs to recover their health.
Medical experts in Ecuador have warned that over the next few months, COVID-19 deaths could reach 3,500 in the province of Guayas alone. We have more in this report.
Ecuador's social media continues to be flooded with complaints from people in the province of Guayas about who is responsible for picking up the bodies of those dying from COVID-19. Their heartbreaking tales highlight the lackluster response by authorities during this pandemic, as they demand the chance to give their loved ones a proper funeral.
This video is to let people know that my in-laws passed away on Monday. Officials did not give them any help. They were told their symptoms did not relate to the coronavirus and that it was a simple cold, but their illness got worse and they eventually died. We are told it was a heart attack, but everything points to the coronavirus.
Authorities claim they are facing off against a disinformation campaign and that less than 100 people have died in Guayas province, but local media continues to report on dozens of daily deaths and of bodies not being picked up for days at a time.
Our health system is collapsing, and this sentiment is based on facts and my own sources. Authorities allege things are under control. That may be true in some instances, but it's difficult to believe when bodies continue to be found along streets and sidewalks.
The recently named official in charge of coordinating the proper pickup and disposal of these bodies has apologized for the mistakes made in Guayaquil, adding that over the next few months, the number of dead in Guayas province could surpass 3,000.
Our task force has already picked up dozens of bodies, on top of those picked up by the different funeral homes. We are working so that they can be buried with dignity. But experts tell us that we should expect 3,000 people to pass away due to COVID-19 in Guayas alone.
During this difficult time for the city of Guayaquil, there's been numerous complaints of layoffs by private companies across Ecuador, and concerns are raising about the impact of this pandemic on indigenous populations, as the government has not implemented preventative measures in their lands.
In Mexico, the metro continues to run during regular hours in the capital amid the global coronavirus crisis, but under strict hygienic measures.
Mexico City's metro continues to be the most popular form of transportation for those who live and commute there. Millions use it every day, even in the middle of a global pandemic.
I don't have a car and must use public transport. I don't really have a choice. Even if authorities demand that we stay at home, many people depend on informal work, and we can't stay at home.
Long before a national sanitary emergency was declared, procedures were put in place at the 46 metro stops. This includes the provision of antibacterial gel and the regular disinfecting of all facilities.
I think the measures they implemented are good.
I'd hope that these cleaning procedures were permanent and that all of us would get used to it.
This sanitary strategy also takes into account the safety of drivers and ensures that all 3,213 wagons of the metro system are clean. All trains used in the metro system have been regularly disinfected for weeks now.
Previously, this was done every 15 days, but now it's a daily procedure for all trains in service. Those of us working here are doing our part, so we hope people place their trust in us.
But despite efforts to improve sanitization, additional precautions were taken, including sending home the elderly. The government has called on people to stay at home and is providing support for informal workers so that they don't need to go out.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Following the confirmation of a fourth case of COVID-19 in Belize, Prime Minister Dean Barrow has announced the closure of borders to nationals beginning on Sunday.
The situation of Belizeans that have been in the U.S. and Mexico simply returning to the country willy-nilly cannot be allowed to continue. It leaves the door wide open to importation of the virus, and this can upend all our war efforts against COVID-19. As a consequence, and after obtaining the unanimous support of the National Oversight Committee, the government of Belize has decided that our borders are now to be closed even to Belizeans seeking to enter the country. Except in the case of those that are returning from travel for urgent medical attention or some other emergency purpose, no Belizean currently abroad can return to Belize.
With 5 more COVID-19 cases taking the country's total to 51, the government of Barbados has initiated a 24-hour lockdown to curb the spread of the virus. The announcement was made on Thursday night.
The curfew which we impose on this country is a 24-hour curfew, unless there is legitimate business which will require you to leave your home and to be on the road. You can only be on the road to go to the pharmacy, to seek medical assistance, or if you are part of the essential services, or if you are doing business with any of the businesses which are exempted under this order. Therefore, as of 5 p.m. tomorrow, Friday the 3rd of April, all supermarkets and mini-marts shall remain closed until further notice.
Haiti has registered 18 novel coronavirus cases after 2 more people tested positive on Thursday. The Minister of Public Health urged citizens to comply with all safety measures the state has already issued to prevent the spread of the pathogen. The French-speaking Caribbean countries is particularly vulnerable as it is already grappling with hyperinflation, poverty, fuel shortages, and an ongoing political crisis. 35 Trinidad and Tobago nationals currently stranded in Barbados might be allowed to return home if they all test negative for COVID-19. The group of citizens who flew from England were denied entry when Trinidad closed its borders on March 17th. They were subsequently accepted by Barbados and placed under mandatory quarantine on March 23rd.
I agreed, after consultation with the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister, to send test kits from Trinidad, from our supply of test kits, up for those persons to be tested for COVID. So the proposal at this stage, and I will be writing to the attorneys during the course of today, the proposal is as soon as they complete their 14-day quarantine cycle in Barbados, I'm going to ask the Barbadian authorities to test them with the kits that we send for COVID, provided they present negative and they don't have COVID according to those test kits. They will then have to make the arrangements, which I will give consideration to, for them to come here. The medical experts, Minister Dial Singh, the CMO, and their team will then advise if they re-enter Trinidad and Tobago, whether they will be put into state quarantine or not.
The World Health Organization Director General has urged countries around the world to do more to protect their citizens from the financial difficulties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
We're in a shared struggle to protect both lives and livelihoods. In the short term, countries can ease the burden on their populations through social welfare programs to ensure people have food and other life essentials. For some countries, debt relief is essential to enable them to take care of their people and avoid economic collapse. We call on all countries to remove financial barriers to care. If people delay or forgo care because they can't afford it, they not only harm themselves, they make the pandemic harder to control and put society at risk.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has extended the state of emergency imposed to stop the spread of the coronavirus. The lockdown that was supposed to end on the 5th of April has been extended by another 30 days.
I decided to extend the state of emergency for a period of 30 days and issued a decree to do so that we can fully manage the affairs of the country at this critical stage that calls for the necessary exceptional measures.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. A suggestion by a French medical doctor to use Africans to test coronavirus treatments and vaccines has been condemned. In an interview with a local TV channel, a doctor identified as Jean-Paul Mira, head of intensive care at Cochin Hospital in Paris, said, quote, "If I can be provocative, shouldn't we do this study in Africa where there are no masks, no treatment, no resuscitation, a bit like it has been done in some studies in AIDS, where among prostitutes we try things." On social media, users expressed anger over the statement, with a former football star Didier Drogba describing it as vile and racist. Well, many people across the world are complaining about having to stay home due to lockdowns imposed to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Thousands of homeless people in South Africa wish they had a home to stay in during this period. On the 26th of March, a day before a national lockdown went into effect, the government set up temporary shelters to house the homeless. However, these shelters quickly filled to capacity, leaving thousands stranded on the streets where they are vulnerable to the infectious virus. Meanwhile, South Africa's National Union of Miners is concerned about mining companies that have continued to operate despite the coronavirus pandemic. The union said the behavior by these firms is barbaric and shows that they do not care about the welfare of their employees who are at risk of contracting the virus. Last week, the government announced that all mines that are not involved in the supply of coal to the state power company must suspend their operations during the 21-day lockdown put in place to halt the spread of the coronavirus. And still in South Africa, 1 week after imposing a nationwide lockdown to halt the spread of the COVID-19, the government has relaxed some of the regulations. Many foreigners trapped in the country will now be able to leave. More details in this report.
This is Camps Bay in Cape Town, a tourist hotspot and well known for its sandy beaches and trendy restaurants. Lockdown regulations also apply to beaches and no one is allowed here. Paul and Yolanda are from the Netherlands and they are regular visitors to South Africa. They're supposed to have left last month but were unable to leave because of the restrictions on flights in and out of the country.
We would prefer to have flown back to Europe, but at the last moment it was changed that also the airports locked down for the flights leaving the country, which surprises still a little bit because there's so many people still in South Africa who would prefer to go out of the country.
They completely understand the reasons for the restrictions, and although they like it here in Camps Bay, they miss the family.
Yeah, my mother is 87, so yeah, of course I would love to see her now. And she's very lonely because she can't go out now. Of course my sister is taking care of her, but yeah, my sister is alone also.
Yesterday the government announced a change in the regulations and they will now be able to leave on chartered flights. Screenings will take place before the flight and those with flu-like symptoms will not be allowed to travel. Meanwhile, former Deputy Minister of International Relations, Marius Fransman, also tested positive for COVID-19. He is currently in hospital. Fransman underwent testing last week after feeling unwell upon his return from an overseas trip. He spoke to us from his hospital bed.
The kind of the symptoms that I felt was flu, breathing problems, as well as a lot of uncertainties and cold fever developed. And I think this comes, I must admit, from nowhere. It hits you, it's like a wave. Let's also form a bond of solidarity in the spirit of international solidarity, and make sure that we create a fighting spirit against coronavirus, whether it's in South Africa or Africa, in Latin America, in the States, in China, in Europe, in Russia. Let's forge, as we were able to overcome other challenges, let's also overcome this particular challenge.
Fransman has appealed to South Africans to practice good hygiene and adhere to the lockdown regulations. Johan Abrams for Talisur in Cape Town, South Africa.
With almost 11,000 deaths in total as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, Spanish military troops have transported bodies to an ice rink that will be used as a temporary morgue. The deputy head of medical emergencies, Maria Jesus Sierra, said there have been 932 deaths in 24 hours, while the country has nearly 118,000 cases. The military has since helped to transport over 155 bodies in one day to temporary facilities. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced that the EU is suspending import tariffs and taxes on medical equipment needed to fight the coronavirus pandemic.
We're working on all fronts against coronavirus. This is an emergency situation that requires extraordinary action. Our hospitals, doctors and nurses need medical equipment, such as ventilators or testing kits, to treat patients and save lives. And they need equipment, masks, gloves, overalls, to protect themselves from contamination. We need a lot of this equipment, and it can be expensive. And that is why today we accepted to eliminate for a while certain taxes on the import of medical devices and equipment from countries that are outside the European Union. This is good for hospitals and for charities, for example. This is our contribution to easing the pressure on prices for medical and protective equipment and to making them more affordable. To give you an example, in Italy, customs duty of 12% and a value-added tax of 22% is levied on some face masks or protective garments that we import from countries like China. Our decision will make them 1/3 cheaper. For ventilators, the average value-added tax rate is at 20%. This is a temporary measure, and it will apply for at least the next 4 months, or longer if necessary. We stand by our health workers and hospitals, and we will do all we can to help them further.
Iran's health ministry spokesperson has reported 134 new deaths from the novel coronavirus, raising the official toll to 3,294 in one of the world's hardest hit by the pandemic.
In the past 24 hours, we have identified 2,715 new cases of contamination by COVID-19, raising the toll 53,183, with 134 who have lost their lives. We have so far registered 3,294 deaths from the COVID-19 disease across the country.
Pakistan's largest city, Karachi, has tightened the lockdown for 3 hours to restrict people from attending Friday prayers at mosque to prevent the spread of the coronavirus infections. The temporary curfew is part of restrictions in Sindh province, home to around 49 million people, which is on lockdown until April 14th.
Businesses are closed. Should we focus on buying medicines or earning a living? If we choose to go to work, police beat us and overturn our push carts, our source of earning a few hundred rupees for us. What should we do? I swear to God, we are very upset.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says his administration is ready to cooperate with Saudi Arabia and the United States to cut oil production in order to stabilize prices, which have fallen sharply in recent weeks due to the low demand and economic uncertainty caused by the coronavirus pandemic.
Russia considers it necessary to combine efforts. We were not, as I have just said, the initiators of the OPEC Plus deal breaking, and we are ready for agreements with partners and within the framework of this mechanism, OPEC Plus. And we are ready for cooperation with the United States of America on these questions. I believe it is necessary to combine efforts in order to balance the market and reduce production as a result of these coordinated efforts. According to the preliminary estimates, I think that we can talk about a reduction in the volume of about 10 million barrels per day. A little less, maybe a little more.
April 2nd marked 2 years since the death of South African anti-apartheid icon Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Various political and social organizations pay tribute to her, lauding her commitment to the liberation struggle. The African National Congress Women's League hailed the role she played in mobilizing women to rise against the oppressive and racist regime, while the economic freedom fighters described her as a liberator who contributed immensely to the struggle against apartheid. Affectionately known as the Mother of the Nation, Madikizela Mandela died aged 81 on April 2nd, 2018, after a long illness. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Stefania Bravo. Until next time.